Hello, BookTube. I was recently informed, one might say transformed, of something that seems unthinkable. I have a regular feature on this channel. I haven't done it as often as a lot of you would like. I should revive it, called Starter Kits, where I go through 10 books that are really good for you to read on a particular subject. Usually not the most in-depth books on the subject. Usually they're books that you can pick up if you haven't read anything on the subject. I've done starter kits on innumerable subjects. But I was recently informed that I've never done one on Venice. Seems unbelievable to me, and I haven't gone to check myself because my source is impeccable. And he said that he did check. That seems unthinkable to me because I love Venice. It is my second favorite place in the whole world. If Boston didn't exist, I would live there. And I did live there. I visited it many times, but I lived there for a stretch of time, a very non-touristy stretch of time. And in the time before that, and while I was there, and especially afterwards, I have read enormously on the subject. So I'm going to give you now a Venice starter kit. There are, of course, innumerable books on Venice. Innumerable. Venice is now a curio. It is now a tourist destination. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Venice makes God only knows how much money off tourism. But it should close itself to tourists for a moratorium of 10 years, at least. Because tourism is literally killing the city. Literally driving it into the mud of the lagoon. But it's going to go into the mud of that lagoon anyway, thanks to climate change. But it is also a jewel. It is an amazing place. There are people who live there. My landlady, when I lived in Venice, was a native Venetian. She and her family lived there. There are ordinary people who do live in Venice. It is possible to do, but it's increasingly unlikely. Not just because of the giant mansions and the whatnots that are constantly being bought up on the mainland, where people are, you're just 20 minutes from the Brenta Canal or whatever. It's not only that, but also if you are 10th generation Venetian, you have a pretty good apartment, maybe 6 rooms, 7 rooms, off a minor canal or over a little footbridge from a square. You would be crazy not to put that on Airbnb. And just, your sister has a place on the mainland, just live with her and rake in the money for having that on Airbnb and just live in it 1 week a year or something like that. One way or another, ordinary people do still live in Venice. So you can get those kind of accounts. Venice has also been a storied city for 1,000 years, so there's lots and lots of fiction of all kinds. And there are also lots and lots of guidebooks. Venice, like I mentioned, it's been a tourist attraction for centuries. And most tourists who go there do it wrong. Most tourists who go anywhere do it wrong, right? It's that age-old lyric, from a song that I love and no one else remembers because I'm 28 years old. Why do the wrong people travel when the right people stay at home? Most tourists do it wrong. They want to cram in as much as possible. I understand it because travel is so expensive. But they want to cram in as much as possible. They want to run from one site to another. They don't soak up the atmosphere of where they are because they think, maybe rightly, I'm never going to get this chance again. I want to maximize it. What they don't realize until they get home is that when you do that, you are overloading your brain and you're not going to remember any of it. Whereas if, God forbid, you sat all day in a piazza, sat all day on a porch or under a canopy or by the beach, read a paper, maybe read your book, maybe had a very slow Venetian lunch, you remember that for the rest of your life. But nevertheless, guidebooks proliferate. And some, thanks to the nature of Venice, some guidebooks are better than others. I did a lot of reading when I was living in Venice, but not a lot of it about Venice at the time. That was usually when I was just visiting. When I was living there, I was trying not to think of Venice as a tourist attraction. And back then, it was possible to do that. It was possible not only to think about Venice as not being a tourist attraction, but also to more or less move around and live in a Venice that isn't a tourist attraction. I don't know if that's possible now. But anyway, I want to show you a few books that I can strongly recommend on Venice. I'm not saying these are the best books. I can strongly recommend them. So that I will have a Venice starter kit on my channel. God help us. What's next? You're going to tell me I don't have a dog starter kit? I must. Anyway, the first one is by Tiziano Scarpa. This is Venice. Venice is a Fish. It calls itself a sensual guide. It is a guide to Venice, but it is much more an autobiography of what it's like to live, to grow up in Venice, to love Venice, to know it from the ground up, as it were. It's a slim thing. It's really impressionable. Really, really, it'll stick with you. A lot of the best Venice books are fairly slim, and they will stick with you. Like this one. This is Venice Observed by Mary McCarthy. Probably one of the most eloquent accounts of Venice done by an outsider. In other words, written in English. Full of great quotes. Full of lines that you can prize out and just remember. Just full of those. A wonderful, wonderful book that is probably going to be in print forever, at least in Venetian gift shops. Then we have history. Venice has been generating histories for a long, long time. We're going to see that on this list. But the first one I want to show you is from 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's John Julius Norwich, and it's his book, A History of Venice. Huge thing. Doorstop of the thing, 800 pages long. But really, really good. Norwich is really, really good. He's a really spirited writer. And here he just takes you from the first immigrants when the lagoon was just 1,000 dotted islands, and then through the mind-boggling, slow historical accretion of a city that doesn't look like it's a collection of little islands in a marsh. So that doesn't look like that at all, and that effectively isn't that anymore. All the major figures are in here, but not in a dumb way, which is really good. Then you can get a more contemporary view of the city from John Berendt, the author of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. This is his book, The City of Falling Angels, which, as you can tell from the cover, turns around one event, a fire 30 years ago in the Fenice Opera House in Venice. It turns around that event and the people around it and the crime, the investigation, whatnot. But it broadens out pretty quick. Any of you who've read Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which is about New Orleans, will know exactly. He follows the same pattern in this book. The book broadens out into a portrait of then contemporary Venice, which isn't that much different from contemporary Venice today, I think. I don't really know firsthand. One of the most jarring things for me is to realize that I will never set foot in Donegal again, and I will never set foot in Venice again. Those are jarring to me. Those realizations, when they hit, sometimes they hit really hard. Also, accompanying them, a digression here, but also the realization that I will never set foot on Australia. I've never been to Australia. It's with Donegal and with Venice, I'll never go back. With Australia, I'll never go there at all. I'll never actually be in Australia. An entire species of dog that I will never meet on this planet. But anyway, I can't say how contemporary this is now, but it is wonderful. It is. Berendt is really, really readable. So let's move on from there. Do we have more fiction? No, not yet. This is another slim little guide. This is, I don't know if it's available anymore. A lot of these things you'd have to get secondhand. I don't think they'll be very expensive. But this is full of delightful pastel watercolors. This is Another Venice by Jacopo Fasolo, which is designed to show you what so many Venice books are, which is Venice off the beaten path, the Venice that those hurried tourists cramming everything in are not going to see. I have known a lot of Venetians who hated these kinds of books. They hated them much more than the guidebooks. A lot of one particular Venetian that I knew when I was living there used to rile him up like crazy, these things, because he said, I don't want people to find another Venice. I don't want them coming into my neighborhood in endless streams, in shorts with, 200 pounds overweight with cameras strapped around their neck and straw hats on their heads. I don't want them doing that. Nevertheless, it's really fascinating to do. It's really fascinating to see and to read about those places. There was not a single inch of Venice that I did not get to while I was living there. Not a single inch of it. So I know all these places, and I guess I can sort of agree with that old friend of mine, but even so. Then Venice did, of course, inspire lots and lots of fiction. I have a few examples here. perhaps the most famous example, if we're not counting the memoirs of Casanova as fiction, I think we should, but we'll leave those out, and we'll just include what is probably the most famous piece of fiction set in Venice, and that is Death in Venice by Thomas Mann. I'm giving this pride of place as number one over the Aspirin Papers, not only because the Aspirin Papers isn't really set in any kind of a Venice that we would care about, Venice just happens to be its setting, but also because I think this did supersede it. And this is the story of, you know the story. It's a novella, it's incredibly good, it's incredibly powerful. You should read it alone. Try not to get a volume that has Death in Venice and other stories. Read it on its own. And it's the story of a writer who falls in love with a boy. So it's particularly charged in the 21st century, in a whole bunch of different ways. If Trump Cult knew what was in this book, they would ban it from every high school in the American Midwest. But it's wonderful. It's really, really good. There are a number of different good translations out here. Venice itself is evoked really well in here. The main character in this book is not the first person to come to Venice and suddenly feel like succumbing to an erotic temptation. That is such a staple of not only fiction about Venice, but the reality of Venice. That it is the heart and soul of Holiday, the great Katharine Hepburn movie, all about Venice. So the way that I would describe this, and when I've described it in the past, Dude Bros have not liked it, they have not appreciated it, but imagine Lolita by Nabokov, only written with talent. That's what this is, and it's terrific. Then another piece of fiction that isn't quite as portentous as Death in Venice is The Thief of Venice. This is a Homer Kelly mystery by Jane Langton. Homer Kelly and his wife are very amateur detectives. They go to Venice and they end up solving a crime. It's cozy, it's very low stakes, it's largely unmemorable, but Jane Langton did this in order to evoke Venice. Just like the Dante game by her evokes Florence. This is meant to evoke Venice, and it does a great, great job of that. Homer Kelly and his wife have virtually no personality. There is virtually no narrative tension here. So Jane Langton has precious little to do but evoke Venice, and she does a really, really good job. This also is full of her own illustrations, her own pencil illustrations that are wonderful. Then we can go back to history. History of Venice, like I said, the history of Venice has been being written for a long time. And I want to recommend the whole of a work. Pietro Bembo, a great figure from the Renaissance, wrote a history of Venice. And the Itati Library of Harvard University did, I think they've done all of it. This volume says volume 2, but I'm pretty sure they've done all of Bembo's history of Venice. And, of course, our ideas of writing history and the science of history and sorting out sources and whatnot has improved enormously since Bembo's day. It didn't exist in Bembo's day. The 19th century Germans gave us what we consider to be history. But nevertheless, that I think makes this even more interesting, because Bembo was still trying his hardest. He was trying to do a conscientious job. So as far as I know, there is no popular edition of this book, no paperback, no nothing like that. Thank God for Itati Library. There is an English language translation that you can get here. So then inevitably when you're talking about Venice, you will be talking about artwork. Venice is full of artwork. It's a work of art on its own. A lot of the buildings are works of art, but a lot of the buildings also contain works of art. There's beautiful architecture by Palladio and a whole bunch of other people, but there's also artwork, paintings, murals. Murals especially because they can't be moved. They were painted onto ceilings and walls, including by one of my favorite artists of all time. So art books of Venice proliferate, and I could have filled this list with them. But instead I picked just one box set. I believe I got this from the publisher once upon a time and got rid of it, probably because I was whining that it was too big. But you can find things like this. This one is from Koneman, and this is Venice Art and Architecture in 2 volumes in a slipcase. No idea if this is still available, and if it's not, maybe the slipcase edition is expensive to buy secondhand, but it's worth it. It has really good accompanying prose, really good descriptions, and the reproductions of the artwork and the architecture are incredible. They're incredible. And then we can finish up with William Dean Howells. And that is going to cause howls of its own. See what I did there? From a number of different people who are going to say, what? You're doing a Venice starter kit and you're not including John Ruskin? Your own guy, John Ruskin? You're absolutely right. I am not including John Ruskin. Ruskin was using Venice for rhetorical purposes. His volumes about Venice are terrific, but this is a starter kit. They are not for a starter kit. They are for a huge amount of preparatory reading and then reading them with a huge amount of footnotes. Now, it's not what I tend to go for starter kits. So we are going to leave Ruskin out of the picture and concentrate on William Dean Howells, also an old friend of mine, who was posted to Venice, had a nominal job. Basically, his job was just to be seen and to host parties, and he was happy to do that. And it gave him a lot of time to explore. So he wrote a whole book of travel sketches of Italy, but he also wrote one just of Venice, Venetian Life. Here we have, what is this? Marlborough Travel Guides. This was a paperback reprint of this that came out in the early 1990s. I rejoiced. I capered on my feet when I saw this. They brought up this and Sketches of Italian Life by Howells as paperback reprints, which is wonderful. I don't think there's been a reprint of these since, and I don't think there will be. There may be a Library of America volume of his nonfiction, of his travel writing. That would be worth hunting up. I should look to see if that exists. But because my paperback copy of this is falling apart, Howells is wonderful at this sort of thing. I think he's a decidedly hit or miss writer of fiction. When he's on in fiction, he's writing better than almost anybody in his time. Don't tell him I said that. This would have gone straight to his head. And he's not taught that way anymore. Famously, The Rise of Silas Lapham was dropped from the Norton Anthology of American Literature. So 2 generations of American freshmen are not even encountering William Dean Howells anymore. At all. Much less, and The Rise of Silas Lapham is not his best book. It's not his best novel. But his bad novels are very bad. But his nonfiction is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And is only negligently collected. His travel writing was collected at least in these 2 volumes. He wrote plenty of other nonfiction I don't think has ever been given popular editions. But his sketches of the Venice of his day, which was pretty much the end of when it was the Venice of his day and was not the Venice of our day. Once Venice became a commercial action, when the city itself became an item for sale, then it changed into what it is now and will be that way until it sinks into the sea. But right before then, it wasn't like that. And this captures the full breadth of what it was like when it was a grubby, dirty city. Tourists still went there because it was so odd, but it wasn't a package tour, a stationary package tour the way it is now. And it's also be eye-opening to you just to read William Dean Howells. A lot of you probably have never read him. And if you have, you might have read his fiction. His nonfiction is a revelation. So there you go. There you go. There's a handful of books on Venice. I could keep going. I have north of 200 Venice books here at Hyde Cottage, and I've read more than that. But this will do. In terms of history, fiction, travel guides, art appreciation, this will do as a Venice starter kit so that now one exists. Good Lord, what an oversight. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.